Marla stood on the HOA side pavement with a clipboard under her arm and her phone already out. It's like she was documenting a crime scene. She smiled at me through the bars of my gate. "Hi there," she said. "I'm with the HOA. We need access." "Go ahead and open the gate." I didn't move. I didn't argue. "This is private property," I said calmly. Her smile tightened. "Yes, and it's within association boundaries," she replied. "So the HOA has authority. Open it now." I told her no, and that's when she made the mistake. She threatened enforcement, without ever checking the only thing that mattered: who owned the land. Because this wasn't about a gate, it was about control. Access behind my driveway. And the kind of authority HOAs assume they can claim just by standing close enough. When people like that operate on confidence instead of proof, they don't stop at rules. They escalate into trespass, fines, bolt cutters, and liens until someone forces them to face records. And once I did, the HOA didn't just lose the argument, they lost jurisdiction. But let me start from the beginning, before we dive into. I'd love to know where you're listening from today, and don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons for more interesting stories. Just like this, people hear HOA and they picture neat lawns, matching mailboxes, and someone getting upset about the wrong shade of beige. But that's not what it feels like when an HOA decides you're the problem. It feels like someone you didn't elect, someone you didn't hire, standing on your land and talking. To you, like your property is a privilege they can revoke, my place has never looked like the rest of the neighborhood. Not because it's run down, not because I'm trying to stand out, it's just different. The HOA section sits up on clean, planned streets, uniform sidewalks, manicured entrances, everything trimmed and measured like the whole place was designed by committee. My property sits. It's just beyond that polish, still surrounded by the same houses, but tucked back, quieter. Older in the bones, a modest home, a stretch of land most people drive past without thinking too hard about where it begins or ends. What makes it stand out isn't the house, it's the gate. Not decorative, not a statement. Peace. A practical, solid metal gate, installed the way a gate gets installed when it's meant to last. It blocks access to my driveway and a strip of land that runs behind the property. Not huge acreage, it's not some luxury estate, just enough space that you don't want strangers wandering around it like it's public. And here's the thing, I didn't even install it. The gate was already there when I bought the place. It had been. Therefore, as long as anyone could remember, normal, quiet, a boundary. That morning, the weather was mild for once. Cool air, soft sun, the smell of fresh-cut grass somewhere in the distance. I was outside with a coffee. Checking the latch like I always did, that's when I saw her. A woman walking up like she was late to a meeting the whole neighborhood was required to attend. She wasn't dressed for yard work, not dressed for a walk. She was dressed like she was heading to a luncheon, light cardigan, bright scarf, clean boots that had never touched real dirt, hair perfect in a way that takes effort. Effort meant to be noticed, and she wasn't. Empty dash-handed, clipboard tucked under her arm, phone already in her hand. Posture that told me she wasn't here to ask a question. She was here to deliver an outcome. I recognized her before she got close enough to introduce herself. Every HOA is one. The person who doesn't speak like a neighbor, they speak like a governing body. Her name was Denise Hartley, though most people just called her Denise from the board. Like she was a weather system, she walked right up to the gate, without slowing down, no hesitation, no pause to check where the property line actually was. She stopped on the HOA side pavement, lifted her phone, and aimed it straight at the lock, like she was collecting evidence for court. Then she smiled at me through the bars. Bright, empty. "Hi there," she called. "I'm with the HOA." I didn't move toward her, didn't put on the polite homeowner smile. I just stood where I was, coffee in hand. "Okay," I said. She took that as permission. "We need access," she said. Not asking. Announcing, "Go ahead and open the gate." I blinked once. "Access for what?" I asked. She lifted the clipboard like it explained everything. Association operations, she said. Maintenance, inspection. We have crews coming through. Here. She didn't ask my name, didn't tell me who the crews were, didn't explain what work they'd be doing. She said it like. My land was a hallway, and she was staff. I looked at her clipboard, then her phone, then back at her. This is private. Property, I said calmly. Denise's smile tightened. Yes, and it's within association boundaries, she replied. So the HOA has authority to access it for community operations. Then her voice hardened. Open it. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't do anything dramatic. I just said the truth in the simplest possible words. You don't have permission to come onto my land? Her eyes narrowed slightly just for a moment. Then she laughed like I'd made a joke. Oh, she said. No, that's not really an option. She stepped closer and tapped the lock with a fingernail. This gate can't block association access, she said. We're going through. I felt the familiar HOA pressure, that tone designed to trigger compliance. The assumption that if she spoke like a manager, I'd respond like an employee. I took a slow sip of coffee. Then I said no. Just that. No explanation. No. Apology. Denise stared like she was waiting for the rest of the sentence when it didn't come. Her voice dropped from cheerful to professional. All right, she said, writing something on her clipboard. Then you're in violation. She raised her voice slightly, not for me, for anyone who might be listening. You're obstructing HOA operations. That's a serious offense. Then she lifted her phone and filmed the lock again. I'm documenting this refusal, she said. Enforcement will be sent immediately. Enforcement. That was the word she wanted to land. The word meant to make you picture fines. Liens. Lawyers. I didn't give her the reaction she wanted. That's fine, I said. Still not opening it, her cheeks flushed, not with embarrassment. With anger, she wasn't ready to show completely yet. Denise leaned closer to the gate and lowered her voice like she was letting me in on a secret. You know, she said, we can cut that lock casual, like she was talking about trimming a bush. We've done it before, she added. If you're blocking access, the HOA can remove the obstruction and charge you for it. I set my coffee down on the post beside me and rested my hand lightly on the latch, not threatening, just present. You cut that lock, I said evenly, and I'll treat it like what it is. Denise's eyes flickered. What it is. She repeated trespassing, I said. Property damage. She didn't like those words. HOA people don't like words like trespassing. They like words like compliance, authority, procedure, standards, trespassing. Makes it sound like what it really is. Someone forcing themselves onto land they don't own. Denise straightened. Offended now, sir, she said sharply. You can't deny access to the HOA. And there it was. That belief. The real religion behind HOA. It's a culture. That the HOA isn't a group of residents. It's a power above residents. She tapped her clipboard again and smiled sweetly in the most irritating way. I'm going to make sure this gets handled properly, she said. Because you're not special. I met her eyes. I'm not trying to be, I said. Then I glanced at the lock. Simple, solid, unbroken, and in my head. One thought came up, calm and clear. You don't even know what you're standing on, because what Denise saw was a gate. What she believed was an obstacle. But what I knew, what I'd confirmed long before she ever walked up here with that clipboard was that this gate wasn't blocking HOA access. It was blocking entitlement, and the difference between the two was about to ruin her whole world. Denise didn't leave my gate that morning like a neighbor who'd been told no. She left like a prosecutor who'd just been handed a case. Her boots clicked on the pavement as she walked away, phone still in. Her hands still filming the gate like she wanted evidence of my refusal of HOA authority. And the weirdest part was how confident she looked. Not confident like someone who's right. Confident. Like someone who's never been challenged. I watched her disappear toward the polished HOA side of the neighborhood past trimmed hedges. And matching porch lights? Then I went inside, shut the front door. Yes. And stood there for a second in the quiet, because I knew how this worked. When you tell an HOA person no, they don't respond like a normal person. They respond like a system. And systems don't take rejection personally. They treat it like a malfunction. They escalate until you correct it. By lunch, the first email came. Subject line, all caps. Notice. A violation, immediate compliance, a REAK. UIR, it had that stiff corporate wording designed to make you feel outnumbered even when it's just one person at a laptop. 3 violations. Listed like facts instead of accusations. Obstructing. Common access, unapproved gate refusal of inspection. I stared at the screen. Common access, unapproved gate, refusal of inspection. The audacity wasn't even the worst part. It was how official it looked. E2S. Love formatting because formatting creates authority. There was a reference number, a case file ID, a line about document retention. It was dressed up like law, and at the bottom was the threat ladder, clean and neatly spaced like a menu. 24 hours to comply, then : daily fines. Legal enforcement, lien consideration, lien. That word doesn't need bold letters to hit you in the stomach. People joke about HOAs until they see the word lien attached to their address. I sat at my kitchen table and felt that familiar homeowner math creep in. How expensive can this get? Because even when you know you're right, you still have to live inside the process. And HOAs count on that. They count on fatigue. They count on you picturing attorney fees and sleepless nights and neighbor drama. And deciding it's easier to just open the gate, I didn't respond. I didn't fire off an angry email. I opened a folder on my computer and saved the notice. Screenshotted it on my phone, wrote the timestamp. Down, because if they wanted paperwork warfare, fine, I could do paperwork. And I wanted the moment they crossed the line. On video, the next escalation came before the day even ended. I heard a truck outside, a diesel rumble. It didn't fit the calm street. Then tires crunching on gravel. I looked out the window and saw a white pickup with a magnetic HOA maintenance sign slapped on the door like a badge. 2 men climbed out wearing reflective vests. One carried a tool bag. The other carried something long and metallic. Bolt cutters. They walked straight toward my gate like they'd done it 100 times. Denise followed behind them like an overseer. Same clean boots, same clipboard, same phone only. Now she looked smug. She didn't greet me when I stepped outside. She pointed at the lock. Immediately. We're here to resolve the obstruction, she said. Resolve, I repeated. Yes, she said. You refuse access. The HOA is authorized to remove barriers to common areas. That isn't a common area, I replied calmly. Denise smiled like she was indulging me. It's within association boundaries, she said. There's an easement. We're not asking. We're notifying you. One of the maintenance guys shifted awkwardly, eyes flicking between me and Denise like he wanted no part of this. The other lifted the bolt cutters, a little higher, just enough to be clear. I pulled out my phone and started recording, not as a threat, as a documentation. Denise's eyes narrowed at my camera. Oh, of course, she said. Record if you need to. That won't change anything. I walked right up to the gate and stood between the lock and the bolt cutters. Not aggressive, just planted. You do not have permission to enter, I said clearly. The man with the cutters froze. He glanced at Denise. Denise lifted her chin slightly. We do? She insisted. It's HOA access. I didn't argue in circles. I didn't match her tone. I just repeated it slower. You do not have permission to enter my property. The second worker cleared his throat. Ma'am, he said quietly to Denise. If he's saying no? We can't. Denise snapped her head toward him. Yes, we can, she said sharply. He's obstructing. Ah! We have authority. Authority always. That word, I kept my voice steady. If you cut that lock, I said, you're damaging private property. Denise's smile vanished. What you're doing, she replied, is interference. And it's going to cost you. Then she raised her voice, just enough for nearby windows to hear. "You'll be fined daily," she announced. "And you'll be responsible for all legal costs. This can go all the way to a lien." She said lien like a final boss. I nodded. Once like I was listening, then I said, "Go ahead and call your lawyer." Denise scoffed. "Oh, we will." Then she leaned in, eyes sharp, "And if you don't move right now, I'm calling the sheriff." I smiled faintly, not amused, just calm. "Please do," I said. That made her blink. HOA people aren't used to threats being accepted. They're used to people shrinking. They're used to people getting scared of conflict. They're not used to someone calmly inviting outside authority to show up. Denise turned away dramatically and tapped at her phone. "Sheriff's office?" she said loudly, with a practiced, helpless tone. "Yes, we have a homeowner obstructing HOA access. We have maintenance crews here trying to do their work, and he's interfering." She paused, listening, then added louder, "And he is filming us." Yes. I kept recording. The maintenance guys stood there like they wanted to disappear. The man with the bolt cutters lowered them slightly. 10 minutes passed, then 15. During that time, Denise paced in front of the gate like a prison warden, and she threw out a couple more threats. The kind people say when they can feel their control. "Slipping will fine you every day," she said. "This will go to collections." My phone stayed up. My expression stayed calm. Then the patrol car rolled up slow and careful on ice-wet pavement, tires crunching softly. Lights flashed once, then off. The deputy stepped out. Not rushed, not aggressive, calm. Late 30s, maybe 40s. Heavy jacket, gloves, boots made for weather. His radio crackled quietly as he took in the scene. Truck gate bolt, cutters, Denise. Me recording. His eyes paused on the bolt cutters just long enough for it to register. Then he walked up. "Evening," he said. "What seems to be the issue?" Denise jumped in immediately, because deputies never get the truth first. They get the loudest story first. "This homeowner is obstructing HOA maintenance access," she said quickly. "We have the right to access this area. He's refusing. He's filming. He's threatening us with trespass. We're trying to remove an unauthorized lock." The deputy nodded slowly, not agreeing, just collecting. Then he turned to me. "Sir," he asked. I kept my voice measured. "This is my property," I said. "They don't have permission to enter. They showed up with bolt cutters and threatened to cut my lock." The deputy's eyes moved back to the lock, then the cutters, then to Denise again. Denise leaned forward, confident again now that an officer was here. "Deputy," she said, "we have easement rights, HOA rights. He's in violation." The deputy didn't react to HOA rights. He reacted to the only thing that mattered. Proof. He looked at Denise and asked one calm question, routine as breathing. "Ma'am, do you have proof this property is in your HOA?" Denise froze, not theatrically, just stopped, like her script had ended. She blinked and glanced down at her clipboard like she expected the answer to be printed there. "Well, it's obviously part of the community," she said. The deputy waited. Denise swallowed. "I mean, everyone here is in the HOA." The deputy didn't move, didn't argue, just stayed in that quiet law enforcement stillness until the truth had nowhere left to hide. Then he asked again, even simpler, "Do you have proof?" Denise flushed. "You can't be serious," she snapped. "I'm on the board." The deputy nodded once, then delivered the sentence that made both maintenance guys visibly relax. "Being on the board isn't proof of ownership or jurisdiction." Denise's jaw tightened hard, and standing there by my gate, I realized the real problem. Denise hadn't come prepared to prove anything. She came prepared to command. And now, the actual authority standing here, authority that didn't care about HOA titles, she was about to make a choice. Walk away, commit the mistake on camera. And I knew which one people like her preferred, because when they lose control, they don't retreat, they double down. The deputy didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten anyone. He didn't take sides. He did what good law enforcement does when people are arguing about land. He asked for proof. Denise had none, not the kind that mattered. She waved her clipboard like it was a badge. She said things like obviously and everyone knows, but the deputy's tone stayed level, ma'am, he said. If you're claiming easement access rights, you need documentation. Denise looked at him like he'd insulted her. We have governing documents, she snapped. Okay, he said. Where are they? Denise's face tightened. Then she turned toward me like I was the reason she was being forced to look incompetent. This is ridiculous, she muttered. He knows he's in the HOA. I didn't argue. I didn't make it personal. I just said, calm and simple. No, I don't. Her head snapped back. What? I'm not in your HOA. I repeated, not to provoke her, because it was the truth. Denise stared at me like she'd never heard a homeowner say that sentence out loud. That's impossible, she said sharply. Your property is right here. You're behind the entrance. You use the same streets. You benefit from the community. Maybe, I said, still not in the HOA? The deputy glanced between us, and I could tell he'd dealt with this kind of thing before. Not HOAs, specifically. Just people who confuse proximity with ownership. He nodded once. All right, he said. This is a civil issue. Then he looked straight at Denise and said it clearly. But here's the rule. No documents, no entry. He turned to the maintenance guys. You understand? They nodded immediately. Denise's jaw clenched, but she started. The deputy lifted one hand. No, he said. Not but. If you have documentation, you can pursue it properly. Right now you don't. He stepped back. So you're done here today. He turned to me. Double quotes, sir. If they come back and attempt entry again, call. Then he walked to his car and left. No drama. Just a quiet reset of reality. Denise stood there in the cold, watching the patrol car pull away like she couldn't believe the world hadn't recognized her authority. The maintenance guys climbed back into their truck immediately, like they'd been waiting for legal permission to disappear. Denise stayed. She stared at me through the bars like I'd personally embarrassed her in front of an audience. You're making a huge mistake, she said quietly. I'm not, I replied. Her nostrils flared. This will become legal, she warned. I nodded once. Good, I said. That word hit her harder than an insult, because HOA people don't like good. They like fear. They like begging. They like someone saying, please don't find me. Denise didn't get that from me. She got calm certainty, and that annoyed her more than defiance ever could. She pointed at the lock again. You can't keep doing this, she said. You can't block us. This is community property. I didn't respond. I just turned and walked toward my house, not storming off, not trying to win the last word, because I needed to stop talking, start proving. That night I didn't sleep much, not because I was scared of Denise, because I could feel the machine turning. HOAs don't stop when a deputy tells them not today. They rewrite it as a delay. Regroup. They come back with letters and attorneys and carefully worded threats. It's designed to replace reality with confidence. And the only thing that beats that kind of confidence is a record. So I built one. I cleared the dining table like I was setting up for a project. Pulled out the old closing file, the one most homeowners shove into a drawer and ignore until disaster forces them to touch it. Mine was thick, deed packet county. Filings, tax records, old surveys from past owners. Stuff I barely glanced at when I bought the place. None of it felt important then. But now, it felt like armor. I started with the deed. The deed is boring on purpose. It's written like it. Wants to put you to sleep, but what it contains is stronger than any HOA rulebook. The legal description of what you own, not the mailing address, not what the own neighborhood thinks, not what Denise claims. The legal description. I traced the text with my finger. Lot numbers, tracked references, string of measurements like coordinates. Then I pulled out the plat. Map OD LOWED at the corners. folded so many times the creases looked permanent. It wasn't from the HOA, it was from the county, and that mattered, because HOAs create internal maps. But only the county's map decides what exists legally. Then I pulled out the HOA, CC and Rs. The packet Denise treated like scripture. I flipped to the section that defined boundaries. Every HOA declaration says some version of this. Declaration applies to the properties described in Exhibit A. And they list parcels, lots, tracts. And if your parcel isn't listed, that isn't recorded as part of that declaration, the HOA can talk all it wants, but it can't enforce. I scanned the exhibit list slowly. Lot 1, Lot 3, a clean sequence. And then a break. Small, easy to miss. But my stomach dropped anyway. Not from fear, from certainty, because my property didn't match the numbering. Pattern, it wasn't just missing, it was different. My land was older than the neighborhood, a separate tract that existed. Long before a developer arrived with matching mailboxes and an entry sign. And when the HOA formed, they treated my parcel like an afterthought, close enough to assume control over. But HOA control isn't about assumption, it's about annexation. And annexation has rules. If a property wasn't part of the original declaration, it has to be annexed in legally formally, recorded with the county, not verbally, not socially, not with a clipboard in confidence, with documents. So I did the next thing HOA bullies hope you'll never do. I went to the county records. I opened the county GIS map, typed in my address, zoomed in. The map loaded with its familiar layers. Parcel lines.easements. Tax map boundaries. And there it was, a thin red line. Marking my parcel, the gate sat clearly inside it, not on HOA common land, not straddling a boundary inside, private then. I zoomed out and turned on the subdivision overlay. The HOA lots appeared like a neat block of identical rectangles. And my property wasn't included, it sat adjacent, connected geographically. Sure, but legally separate, like a house built on the edge of a different world. I leaned back and stared at the screen, not excited, not angry, just steady, because this wasn't opinion anymore. It wasn't even argument, it was county map. Data tied to tax records, evidence that didn't care how loudly Denise spoke. Then I went deeper. I searched recorded instruments by parcel number, and after deeds releases, easements, I found it a recorded survey, map.stamped, dated filed. It showed the HOA boundary line. I had a hard stop. And that line. Stop before the gate, stop before my driveway, stop before my land. In plain black ink, it said something Denise could never out-heal. The HOA ends here. I printed it immediately. Printed the GIS map. Printed my deed legal description. Stacked everything on the table. Right, like I was looking at the skeleton of the whole situation. Denise had been threatening fines and liens over property her HOA didn't legally control. It wasn't overreach. It was reckless. And the moment I realized that, something colder settled in. If the HOA was willing to go this far without verifying boundaries, what else had they been enforcing? Without authority? And why were they so desperate to get through my gate? Because now it was obvious. They weren't trying to inspect my gate. They were trying to reach something past it. I slid everything into a binder. Clear sleeves, tabs, labels, because HOA, people don't respect truth, they respect what truth looks like. When it's formatted like evidence, I closed the binder carefully. Then I looked at the lock hanging on the gate, solid metal. Motionless, holding a boundary Denise didn't understand, and I realized the most powerful part of all. Denise wasn't about to discover she'd made a mistake. She was about to discover the HOA had no authority here at all, which meant everything. She'd tried the threats, the bolt cutters. The violation notices weren't enforcement. They were trespass attempts dressed up as governance. And the next time she showed up, I wouldn't be the one on defense. She would. The next morning, I woke up to 3 more HOA Emails. Not responses, not dialogue, just more paperwork thrown like rocks. Each one had a new case update, a new violation code, and a new warning about escalating fines. And every single one carried the same assumption, that I would eventually get tired, that I would eventually choose peace over principle, that I would pay them. Open the gate and let them walk onto my land just to make the pressure stop. That's how. HOAs survive, not by being right, by being exhausting. I stood in my kitchen holding my phone, staring at Denise's latest message, and felt something settle in me, not anger. A decision. Because there comes a moment in every conflict like this where you realize if you keep acting like this is casual, they'll keep treating it like they're allowed. So I stopped playing. Nice, not rude, not dramatic, just serious. I made coffee, sat down, opened my laptop, and started writing a letter. The way adults write letters when they're done being threatened. Not an email back and forth. A formal notice, something that lives on paper, something that gets mailed, something that forces them to understand. This isn't neighborhood drama anymore. This is a legal boundary being challenged. I use the HOA's own case number at the top. Their address, my address, the date, then the subject line. Plain and undeniable. Dispute of violation notices, demand for proof of authority notice against trespassee, kept the tone calm, not emotional, no insults, no personality arguments, just facts. I disputed all violation notices, I disputed all fines, and I stated clearly, why? Do not consent to entry onto my property by HOA agents, contractors, or maintenance crews. Then I wrote the demand that mattered most, the one question they couldn't answer with vibes. Provide the recorded instrument demonstrating annexation of my parcel into the association. Not show me what you believe, not tell me what you assume. Provide the county recorded document, the thing that makes HOA authority real. And then I added the line they needed to see immediately. Any attempt to cut the lock, remove the gate, or enter the property will be treated as trespass and property damage and reported accordingly. Still calm, still not threatening, just stating what the situation already was. I printed it, signed it, copied it, then I paid extra for certified mail with return receipt. I wanted proof they received it because proof is the only language HOAs pretend not to speak till it's spoken back to them. Then I filed records requests. This part wasn't emotional. It was surgical because HOAs hate records requests, not because they don't have records, but because records don't care about tone. Records either exist or they don't. I requested 3 categories, clearly. Enforcement logs, who they've threatened, how often, and for what access justification easement policies. Anything claiming they need to go through my gate. Board knowledge meeting minutes and budgets tied to any maintenance project. Behind my parcel, and I cited their own documents, the section that grants owners access to records. Then I sent it not only to Denise, but to the full board, because I wasn't going to let Denise control what got lost. If even one board member had a conscience, it'd start getting uncomfortable reading those requests, and I wanted them uncomfortable. Not for cruelty, for accountability. That's when something became clear. If Denise truly believed my land was in the HOA, she would have shown up with documentation, not bolt cutters. Documentation, which told me her confidence wasn't based on legality, it was based on desire and wants. I looked at the land behind my gate, I understood the desire. My driveway wasn't just a driveway. It was a connection point, a shortcut, a clean route from the HOA streets to the back section of the development, a path that could give contractors easy access. A route that could turn one long drive into a quick loop, and suddenly, maintenance sounded less like upkeep and more like an excuse. HOAs do this constantly. They pretend access is required for community benefit, when what they really want is control over land they don't own. I didn't know the full plan yet, but I could feel it. That gate wasn't annoying to them. It was inconvenient, and inconvenience makes entitled people reckless. Around noon, my phone rang. The surveyor, he'd reviewed county records more thoroughly overnight. His voice was calm, uninterested. In drama, I can confirm, he said. Your gate sits well inside your parcel boundary. I didn't interrupt. He continued. And the HOA boundary line does not include your tract. If they claim it does, they're wrong. He paused, and if they're threatening enforcement without proof of annexation, that's reckless. Reckless. That word mattered. I asked if he could issue it in writing, stamped, signed with map references. He said yes. Later that day, I met with a title attorney, local guy, calm, experienced. He studied my paperwork for 10 minutes and nodded slowly. They never annexed you, he said. I blinked. So it's really that simple. He leaned back. Yes and no, he said. Legally, yes. Socially, no. They've been acting like you're in the HOA because they've gotten away with it. He tapped the recorded survey. This is your shield, he said. Then he tapped the HOA notices, and those, he added, are going to become their problem if they keep pushing. That was the first time someone said out loud what I'd been thinking. Not you might win, not it depends, he said. This becomes their problem. That evening I went to the county clerk's office, not because I wanted to, because I wanted one more layer of proof. Historic plats, older tract filings. The roots of the parcel, the clerk helped. He pulled the older records. She didn't dramatize it. She didn't need to. She slid the old filing across the counter and said something simple, almost bored. Your tract predates the subdivision. That was enough. That was confirmation stamped into paper. I wasn't defending a feeling anymore. I was defending a fact. That night I posted no. Trespassing signs properly. Not aggressive, not petty, just clear. The kind that politely informs anyone. Approaching. This isn't shared. This isn't public. This is private. I took photos after each sign went up. Wide shots, close-ups, time dash stamped. Then installed a small camera pointed at the gate. Again, no drama, no gotcha. Just documentation. Because once you realize someone is willing to bring bolt cutters to land they don't own, you stop assuming they'll behave rationally later. The next day, the HOA finally responded. Not with proof, not with annexation documents, not with an apology with attitude. Denise sent a community-wide email. It's written like she was protecting everyone. The board will be voting to address an unauthorized gate obstructing community access. Unauthorized community access, more fantasy language. But now I could hear the change in tone. It wasn't written like policy. It was written like pressure. 5 minutes later, I got a second email, only addressed to me. Subject line, final notice brief, cold almost. Smug gate will be removed by HOA contractor if access is not granted immediately. Costs will be billed to homeowner. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not angry, not shaken, just amazed at how quickly confidence turns into criminal intent when it's allowed to. They weren't asking anymore. They weren't negotiating. They were announcing trespass like it was governance. I closed the laptop slowly, then opened my binder again. Survey, D.GIS, overlay, historic plat, certified letter copies, return receipt tracking, and I thought, okay, if they want to remove my gate, they're not just overreaching, they're stepping into a whole different world of consequences. Because once you threaten to physically alter someone's property without jurisdiction, it stops being HOA enforcement. It becomes something uglier, and the next time they touch that lock, it won't be enforcement. It'll be evidence. The HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday night at 6:30. Denise made sure everyone knew it. She didn't send one. Email, she sent reminders. Emergency agenda, community access issue. Mandatory. Attendance strongly encouraged. Those were the phrases HOAs use when they want a crowd. Not because they need input, but because they want witnesses. They wanted the room full. They wanted the neighborhood there to see what happens when someone says no. And even though I wasn't in their HOA, I went anyway, because I'd learned something important. If you let an HOA tell your story in a room full of people, they'll rewrite it like a crime. And that meeting wasn't private. It was in a community. Clubhouse, open doors, open seats, and Denise had already made sure my name was the headline, so. I showed up with my binder. Plain black binder tabs, sleeves, documents. Organized like evidence, because that's what it was. The clubhouse sat near the HOA's entrance, the glossy part of the neighborhood where landscaping always looks like it's on payroll. When I walked in, the room was already tense. Plastic folding chairs and crooked, rose-dot stale coffee smell, a faint chemical note of carpet cleaner. People stood in clusters. Spring, and their heads turned as soon as I entered. Not everyone knew me, but most recognized. The guy from the emails. I didn't scan for allies. Didn't try to win anyone over. I just sat in the second row, binder on my lap, and waited. Denise stood at the front with 2 other board members, and she looked. Pleased, not nervous, not uncertain. Pleased, like she'd been waiting for this moment. She tapped the microphone twice. It's Q-er. Then she smiled. Good evening. Everyone, she began. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Was the same tone she'd used at my gate, cheerful, controlled, authoritative. This meeting is being held to address an obstruction impacting community operations, she continued. Obstruction, not boundary dispute, not paperwork. Confusion. Obstruction. A criminal-sounding word for a gate that had existed longer than her HOA. Then she turned her head slightly and looked directly at me. And for the record, she added, voice loud enough to carry, the homeowner responsible is present tonight. Heads turned. I could feel it. The HOA spotlight. Denise smiled wider. Satisfied. This homeowner, she said, pointing toward me like I was on trial, has been obstructing the community's right to access shared areas and has refused to cooperate with association operations. Confusion, some annoyance. Denise leaned into the mic. It's disruptive, she said. It's selfish. It's not how we do things here. Not how we do things here. That phrase wasn't. It's meant to inform it. It was meant to shame. She wasn't trying to win a legal point. She was trying to win the neighborhood, so she could enforce through social pressure, even if she couldn't enforce through law. Denise lifted a sheet of paper. The board will be voting tonight, she said, to authorize removal of the unauthorized gate and lock. Unauthorized again. She looked right at me. This is your final opportunity to resolve this without escalation. I didn't move, didn't fidget, didn't react. Because if you ever want to watch an HOA leader lose control, the fastest way is to deny them the emotional reaction they came to harvest. Denise waited. She expected protest. She expected explanation. She expected me to look guilty when she didn't get it. Her smile twitched, so I stood up. Not fast, not angry, like someone about to give a calm presentation. And I said, before you vote on anything, I have one question. Denise's face tightened immediately. This is not the time for I have one question, I repeated gently. The room quieted. HOA meetings always quiet when someone's confident. Denise hesitated and nodded stiffly like she was doing. Me a favor? Fine, she said. Make it quick. I looked directly at her. Show the annexation document, I said. A pause. Denise blinked. Excuse me? The annexation document? I repeated calmly. The county recorded instrument. Proving my parcel is legally part of your HOA jurisdiction? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just made the statement inevitable. Since you're threatening fines, liens, and gate removal, I added, you must have it, so show it. The room shifted because homeowners don't talk like that. Homeowners argue fairness. They argue feelings. I was arguing paperwork. Denise flushed. We don't have to. I raised one hand slightly. Still polite. Yes, you do, I said. If you're claiming authority, it has to exist in writing. Denise laughed sharply like the idea offended her. It's obviously part of the HOA, she snapped. It's within the neighborhood. It's not a legal answer. Said, The words landed like a slap, but my tone didn't. Denise glanced at the other board members, waiting for backup. She didn't get it. One stared down at the table. The other looked like he wanted. So I asked the next question. Show. The recorded boundary map, I said. The plat exhibit proving the HOA boundary includes my lot. Denise's voice rose. You're wasting everyone's time, she snapped. He's trying to derail the meeting with technicalities. That's what people call the truth when the truth is inconvenient. I nodded once. Then I opened my binder. I'll keep it simple, I said. And I pulled out the first document. My deed, I said. Legal description included. And the next, county GIS boundary overlay, I continued, showing my parcel line and the gate location. The gate is inside my property. Then the next, recorded survey, I said. Stamped, counter-recorded. HOA boundary stops before my gate. I didn't slam papers down. I didn't wave them around like a flag. I placed each document on the table in front of the board like evidence. Denise leaned forward, narrowing. Then she tried to regain control. Those don't matter, she said. The association has easement rights. I tilted my head slightly. Okay, I said, show the easement. Denise froze. Not because she didn't want to, because she couldn't. The room went quiet, real quiet. And in that quiet, I watched a change take place. For the first time, the audience stopped seeing me as difficult and started seeing Denise as someone making claims without proof. So I made it plain, no theatrics. If you enter that property, I said it's trespass. Denise scoffed. If you cut that lock, I continued, that's property damage. Her eyes flared. If you remove the gate, I said calmly, that becomes criminal damage. Now she was visibly furious. She leaned into the microphone. This is intimidation, she snapped. This homeowner is threatening the board. I didn't even look at the audience. I kept my gaze on her. I'm not threatening you, I said. I'm warning you. And people felt the difference. Threats are emotional. Warnings are factual. Then, I flipped to another tab in my binder and said two words that made Denise's posture stiffen. Enforcement records. Denise scoffed. Logs. I nodded. That's interesting, I said calmly. Because your violation notices site log references, case numbers, and document retention. I held up her notice, which means one of two things. I said, I paused just long enough for it to land. Either those records exist, or these case numbers are meaningless. The room moved like a wave, not screaming, not chaos, but inaudible. Shift the sound of people realizing something dangerous. If the HOA can threaten to remove a gate without proof of jurisdiction, what else can they threaten without proof? How many fines were built on confidence instead of authority? How much enforcement was just bullying dressed up as standards? Denise's voice sharpened. This is exactly why we need decisive board action. She snapped. The board will proceed with the vote. She looked at the other board members hard, motioned to remove the unauthorized gate and bill the homeowner. One board member hesitated. Denise's stare pinned him. He swallowed, glanced at the bylaws in front of him like he'd rehearsed this, then slowly raised his hand. Not proud, not confident, just obedient. The second member raised his hand too. The motion passed. Denise smiled, victorious, smug. There, she said, it's done. Then she turned toward me. You have been notified, she said. Contractor will remove the gate. I didn't react, because I'd already gotten what I needed. I'd gotten her to commit publicly to something she had no authority to do. In a room full of witnesses, I slid my documents back into the binder. Denise watched me, expecting rage, expecting pleading. Instead, she got calm. I stood to leave, and as I walked toward the exit, someone touched my elbow. I stopped and looked back. A man in the shadows near the doorway, Calvin, the HOA treasurer. He looked uneasy, like he was afraid someone would see him talking to me. He leaned closer and spoke quietly. You're not in the HOA? He said, I nodded. Calvin swallowed. But they've been billing money connected to your land. My stomach tightened. Not anger, not fear, clarity. That one sentence wasn't gossip. It was a financial accusation. And suddenly everything snapped into place. It's the desperation, the gate obsession, the refusal to accept proof. This was never about maintenance. This was about money, and as I walked out into the cold night air with the binder under my arm, I understood something with unsettling certainty. Denise wasn't just overreaching. She was protecting something, and now I was close enough to see. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was worried about Denise personally, but because of what Calvin had said quietly. Like he was afraid the walls might repeat it. They've been collecting money connected to your land. That sentence kept looping in my mind, because it wasn't just an accusation, it was a motive. And once you understand motive, everything else makes sense in a way that's hard to unsee. The HOA wasn't obsessed with my gate, because it was inconvenient. They were obsessed with my gate, because it interfered with something they'd already built into their plans. That's what bothered me most, not the aggression, the assumption. The assumption that they could act first and justify later. That's not just entitlement. That's governance without boundaries. So the next morning, I reached out to Calvin. I didn't text him like we were friends. I kept it short, if you meant what you said. I need specifics, not opinions. Documents. He didn't reply right away. When he finally did, it was one line. Meet me at 7 o'clock tonight. Parking lot behind the grocery store. Bring nothing but a notebook. That alone told me how serious this was. Treasurers don't meet. You in parking lots if everything is normal. Calvin's documents, Calvin, arrived in a dull sedan and didn't park beside me. He parked 2 spaces away, like distance was protection. When he got out, he didn't smile. He just nodded once and said, under his breath, I can't meet you at my house. Denise checks. Then he handed me a manila envelope. I shouldn't be doing this, he said. I know, I replied. His hands were red from the cold. He kept glancing around the lot like he expected headlights to swing toward us. I volunteered because I thought it was landscaping and budgets. He said, I didn't think he stopped himself, then said the words that mattered. Denise has been using the HOA like a weapon for 2 years, but this time, she's doing it because she's cornered. I opened the envelope, not emotional, just scanning numbers, budget lines, vendor allocations, reserve references. Then I saw it. A line item written so vaguely it could hide anything. Access Improvement Project Phase 1 under it. Contractor mobilization / site prep. The amount wasn't huge, but it wasn't small either. Enough money that it should have been discussed publicly. Enough money that should have had homeowner visibility. Access improvement, said quietly. Nodded. They've been treating that strip behind your gate like it's a future HOA connector, he said. A service corridor. Something they can market. Market. That word sat heavy, as pretend they're about community. But when you get close enough, you see the truth. They're about property value. And property value makes greed look clean. And professional Calvin flipped another page and pointed. It wasn't even formal, just a board-side scribble in the margin. But it was damning. Gate removal homeowner resistance anticipated. I stared at it. Denise hadn't been reacting to my refusal. She'd been predicting it, planning around it. Why? I asked calmly. Calvin's face tightened. They wanted to turn it into a shortcut, he said. For contractors, deliveries, emergency access, whatever sounded noble. They wanted it as a selling point for the back section. He exhaled. There's development pressure. People complain about the long drive out. Denise wanted a solution. Then he looked at me. She told the board it was already basically HOA land, that nobody would challenge it. He paused, and she was right. Nobody did, till you. I didn't react outwardly, but inside. Everything clicked into place so cleanly it almost made me dizzy. This wasn't maintenance. It was a land grab dressed as policy. They weren't trying to inspect anything. They were trying to establish access by force so later they could claim it. Had always been there. That's how property theft happens in suburban neighborhoods. Not with masks, with agendas and votes. I looked at Calvin. Does the board know it's not in the HOA? I asked. Calvin swallowed. I told them he admitted months ago. Denise said it didn't matter. She kept saying, we'll handle it through enforcement. Enforcement. Not law. Not ownership. Enforcement. As if fines can turn into deeds. I closed the envelope slowly. This isn't just unethical, I said. Calvin nodded, eyes hard now. It's lawsuit territory, he said. If they cut your lock and remove your gate, the HOA is liable. The board is liable. He hesitated, and Denise becomes liable personally. Then after a long pause, and the residents will realize they've been paying for a project. That was never legal. That was the fuse. 2 nights later, the HOA held another meeting. This time it wasn't advertised as emergency access. It was framed as community update and enforcement action review. They were trying to soften it, control it, but it didn't matter. The first meeting had lit the neighborhood up after that night. Neighbors had started calling everyone, insurance, attorneys, and yes, code enforcement. Someone had clearly forwarded the certified letters and county maps. Because now the outside world was listening. When I arrived, the clubhouse was packed. Not just people sitting quietly, people holding paperwork, printed emails, photos of my gate, screenshots of HOA, threats. Someone in the back had a locksmith invoice, printed out like a receipt of intent. Residents who had never attended an HOA meeting in their lives stood with their arms crossed and jaws tight. Denise sat at the front again, but her posture had changed. Not confident now, defensive and beside. Her sat a man in a suit, different attorney than the last meeting, bigger city feel, not community council. Damage control counsel. Denise tapped the microphone, and before she even spoke, people were already murmuring. The room was done with her. She started anyway. We're going to keep this orderly, she said fast. There has been misinformation. Spreading the misinformation. Someone snapped. Denise flinched. Her attorney leaned in and whispered something. Denise continued. Outer. The board acted within its rights to ensure community access and to perform essential maintenance. That's when I stood up. Not angry, not performative, just ready. I walked calmly to the front, binder in hand. Denise pointed at me like she wanted the room to turn again. This homeowner is disrupting, but the room didn't turn on me. It turned toward the binder, because people had learned. Binders mean proof. I spoke calmly. Denise. I said, before you claim maintenance again, I have a question. The attorney tried to cut in immediately. This is not the forum. I looked at him politely. It absolutely is. I said, you've taken votes to remove private property. That makes this the forum. He blinked, caught off guard by how calm I was. Then I held up the first page. This is the HOA budget, I said. Line item, Access Improvement Project, Phase 1. The room shifted. People leaned forward. I continued. This project assumes access exists through my property. Murmurs turned into voices. What project? Why are we paying for access? Denise's face tightened. That's not what I held up the next page. This is the board note attached to the budget planning, I said. Then I read it clearly. Gate removal, homeowner resistance anticipated. The room erupted. Not rage, shock, betrayal. Betrayals. You planned this. You were going to take his land. We paid for that. The attorney stepped forward instantly, voice sharper now. Everyone calm down, this is being mischaracterized. Then Calvin stood up from the side. He didn't look proud. He looked sick, and in a steady voice, loud enough for the mic to catch. He said, it's not mischaracterized. The room went dead. Calvin continued. The board approved funds assuming access rights, he said. Denise pushed it as maintenance. He looked toward Denise, then away like it physically hurt, but we never had legal proof of jurisdiction, someone whispered. So we're liable. Calvin nodded once. Yes. That's when panic became real. Not because people cared about my gate, because they cared about their money, their liability, their home values, and the fact that an HOA land grab could turn the whole neighborhood into a lawsuit. A woman in the second row stood. I want a full audit, she said loudly. Tonight. Another man stood. I want Denise removed, he said. Another voice. I want to vote right now. Denise lifted her hands like she was trying to tame fire. This requires procedure, she insisted. But the room had moved past procedure. Someone shouted. You don't get procedure after you tried to steal land. Steal. That word didn't feel emotional anymore. It felt accurate. Denise snapped back. This is slander. But it wasn't slander. It was documents. And documents don't care about her feelings. Then something happened Denise couldn't control. At all. A man in a county jacket stood up from the back. I'm with code enforcement, he said calmly. The room quieted like someone flipped a switch. He held up a folder. We've received multiple complaints regarding potential easement misrepresentation and unauthorized access planning. Denise looked like her lungs forgot how to work. The county representative continued. If the association is claiming or attempting to establish access across private land without recorded easements, we will be reviewing filings, a woman whispered. Oh my God. And Denise's attorney leaned close and whispered urgently, I didn't hear everything, but I heard the key words. Personal risk. That's what this was now. Not embarrassment liability. Denise stared at the county representative like she'd never imagined another authority could walk into the room. That's when the attorney did. Something I didn't expect. He stepped forward, raised his hand, and spoke into the mic like he was trying to save a sinking ship. We're going to take a recess, he announced. Boos erupted, but he raised his hand again. This is not optional, he said firmly. The board needs to confer with counsel. Then he leaned down toward Denise. The room was so still I caught it anyway. Stop talking. Denise's mouth snapped shut. The board disappeared through the side door. The room exploded. Into loud conversation, residents weren't angry anymore. They were calculating audits. Recall personal. Attornadoes, misuse, insurance carrier exposure. I stayed seated, binder closed, because the evidence did what it was supposed to do. Not emotional damage, structural damage. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Finally, the side door opened. The attorney walked out first. But Denise didn't walk beside him, and that detail alone made the room go quiet. He approached the mic, adjusted his jacket, took a breath, then said the sentence that landed like a verdict. 2. Information presented tonight and the legal risks now involved. I am advising the board to immediately suspend enforcement actions related to this property, to cease any attempt to remove the gate. He paused, then said it even more carefully, and I will not represent Ms. Hartley in any individual capacity in this matter. Denise didn't move. She sat frozen. No smugness, no power, just a person who tried to weaponize paperwork and ran face first into records. And as the meeting dissolved into demands for audits and resignations, I looked down at my binder and realized something with absolute certainty. Denise didn't lose control because I out-yelled her. She lost control because she finally ran into something she couldn't find her way through. Ownership not once the records went public. After that second meeting, the HOA didn't send another bold enforcement email. No more all-caps subject lines. No more final notice. No more threats about contractors, because once an attorney steps away from a board member in a public meeting, once words like liability and personal exposure get said out loud, the HOA stops acting like a kingdom. It starts acting like what it always was, a corporation trying to protect itself, and corporations don't care about Denise. They care about risk. For the first time since she walked up to my gate with her phone and clipboard, Denise couldn't bluff her way forward. She couldn't escalate. She couldn't vote harder. She'd finally hit the one barrier HOA authority can't push through. Ownership. The days that followed were quiet. But it was the kind of quiet that tells you things are happening behind closed doors. Conference calls, law offices, emails. No. Homeowner sees. Then one morning, it began. An email arrived from the HOA. Not from Denise, not even from the board president, from the association's council. Subject line: Notice of action, resolution of disputed ENFORCE, and Tay that alone told me. Denise was finished. I opened it slowly and read every sentence twice. The language was careful corporate. Controlled, designed to concede nothing while conceding everything. But the outcomes were unmistakable. All fines rescinded, all enforcement notices withdrawn, no lien consideration, no. Future enforcement action permitted regarding my gate or property, no. Apology, there never is. HOAs don't apologize. They resolve. They conclude. They close the matter. And I didn't need an apology. I needed boundaries. Respected. This was the first official sign that boundaries were finally being enforced. Against them, then came the part that made me exhale. A written agreement, not a promise, not a handshake, a document it stated clearly. The association will cease all direct contact regarding the property dispute, and will communicate only through legal counsel. In other words, Denise was never coming back to my gate with a clipboard, and the HOA knew that if she did, it would cost them. 2 days later, Denise tried one more move, not a bold one, a petty one. She sent an email to the county complaining that my no trespassing signs were harassment and that my camera was intimidating. Classic, when HOA people lose authority over land, they start pretending boundaries are aggression, but this time it didn't land, because within hours, the association's council sent a short follow-up message, not to the community, just to me. Please disregard any further direct contact from Ms. Hartley. She is not authorized to communicate on behalf of the association. That was the quietest, cleanest shutdown possible. Not dramatic, but final. Denise wasn't in charge anymore. She wasn't even speaking for them anymore. She had become noise. Nothing was removed. No contractor arrived, no bolt cutters, no truck. The gate stayed exactly where it had always been. Steady, quiet, practical. I replaced the lock anyway, not because it needed it, because it felt right. A fresh lock on an old boundary. Like closing a chapter cleanly, I posted the trespass notices. Permanently. One sign on the gate, one sign near the driveway, one sign visible from the HOA side. Path not hostile, not petty, just clear. And I kept the camera. Not because I was paranoid, because I'd learned something valuable. People who believe they're entitled to your property don't stop believing it overnight. They just stop acting on it when consequences become real. A week later, residents received a disclosure notice, not a casual update. Legal housekeeping. The kind HOAs hate doing because it admits past misrepresentation, it stated. HOA boundary maps were being amended, association records would be corrected, updated disclosures would be provided for future home sales translation. They'd been pretending. My land was theirs, and now they had to admit it wasn't. Even better. The updated map included a clear visual boundary line, and for the first time, the neighborhood could see it plainly. The HOA ended before my gate. That gate had never blocked community access. It had only blocked the HOA's fantasy. The biggest shift wasn't the gate, it was the money residents demanded the audit immediately, and the board couldn't stop it, not after everything was now public. Calvin stayed treasurer, but no longer quiet. He became what ESAs fear most. A treasurer who understands responsibility. A forensic accountant was hired formally. Records. Pulled. Reserve spending reviewed. Vendor contracts examined, and within a month, the HOA sent out another email. Reserve and budget review findings they didn't name. Denise directly. HOAs rarely put blame in writing, but the report included phrases like irregular approvalsensficti, disclosure inappropriate. Budget assumptions payments authorized without documented vote. That last line was the dagger, because it meant something simple. People's money had been moved. Without proper authority, when residents read it, they didn't need anyone to translate. They understood exactly what happened. They'd been paying into a system that assumed nobody would ever question it. Until Someone questioned it. Denise didn't get publicly dragged. No. Viral meltdown. No dramatic screaming. No shouting match. She didn't need it. What happened to her was quieter and permanent. Denise resigned. That was the official wording. Miss Hartley has stepped down effective immediately. No explanation. No goodbye. No tribute. Just gone. And that's how power collapses in neighborhoods. It's like this. Not with drama, with distance, with paperwork, with people suddenly acting like they never supported the person they once feared. Denise wasn't treated like a villain. She was treated like a liability, reduced to what she'd always been beneath the title, a woman hiding behind paperwork. Until paperwork stopped protecting her a few months later. The season shifted, the air warmed, trees filled back in. The neighborhood looked normal again. But it wasn't the same normal. It felt healthier, less tense, less controlled. One evening I walked out toward my gate as the sun dipped low enough to throw long shadows across my driveway. The metal was warm from daylight. I rested my hand on it and listened. No voices, no arguing, no threats, just wind. Distant lawnmowers, and the soft creak of hinges. I closed the gate, slowly, not out of anger, not out of spite, simply because it was mine to close. The latch clicked into place, quiet metal, meeting metal, a sound that meant boundary, and the moral was simple: you don't fight power with rage, you fight it with records, because entitlement can argue forever, but ownership doesn't argue. Ownership just exists, and when overreach finally meets proof, it collapses.